I think we're good. I think everybody can see. Hello, everybody. It's Miss Ashley here, early childhood enthusiast and play advocate from Villaging Brown and Playpen African. I am here with a very, very special guest. I'm so excited. Sorry we couldn't go live, but it's going to be excellent. So I wanted to introduce Mama Yai and Mr. Baruti, Baba Baruti here, and how are you all today?
We're great.
Very
Yes.
good.
Okay, so it is Thursday night. I know we're all tired. We had a long day.
Yes.
How are you all feeling?
But talking about African-centered education always is inspiring and energizing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even though today was a class day for me, and I'm not trying to prop you up, but the idea of this is it's exciting. It's motivating. And we talk all the time about folks who are coming along, behind us, and to see them do their work, that's always giving us energy.
Yes.
Because that way you know that what you're doing is paying off. It's not in vain. Because sometimes, you're wondering.
Yeah.
You see things that you shouldn't see. You hear things that you shouldn't hear. But when you see people doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
I've kind of watched you both from afar for a while now, and I've always admired your work. And so I really appreciate you all having me here. So we're going to talk about a few different things. But first, we're on the topic of education, but I've always wanted to pick your brains about what was your personal education experience like in grade school. What was that like for you?
Well, I grew up in Mississippi in a small town, and actually I was very fortunate in that it was 99.9% black, and so the school as well, I think, maybe in high school, there may be a few Europeans somewhere along the way, but in general, it was black.
Yeah.
So I had that nurturing experience, even though it was a public school. So unfortunately, you had the public school curriculum.
Right.
But I was in a small setting and where the teachers cared about you and you learned. So I would say, my experience was good.
That's good. That's good.
Mine was good as well. DC's home for me. So 87% black at the time I was growing up. So I think through all of the time I was supposed to be in school, and I say so, I'm a 7th grade dropout. So I did a lot of stupid stuff, but I was still at the school even through high school. So I was in the school, I just wasn't taking classes.
Okay.
But the entire time I was Woodridge Taft Tech, I remember maybe 4 students who weren't us. Out of all of those hundreds and hundreds of students. So it wasn't the love part that she's talking about. That was there. You saw that the men teachers, they didn't play you or their sons, act up. You caught it. The women teachers, they were your moms, and you acted accordingly. It was a very I said comfortable setting. There was not a disconnect, at least in my family. All the families weren't like that, even though all of the families were family. All of the family, in my family, my mother was there. So in elementary school, the students knew her as well as they knew the teachers. So it was that is the model that I have seen, I have learned with time that works. If the mother's not there, if the father's not there, if somebody in the family, even an older brother, older sister, if they're not there making sure that you're doing your work, of course, making sure teachers doing their work, but if you're not doing your work, then there's somebody there to put their foot down on you to bring you back in line. That's and I know we haven't gotten into that, but I think that's one of the major things that's missing today. That sense of family that she was talking about, and it's for us, it was small town, just a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I had the exact opposite.
Okay.
So I'm from Boston, and so there's a program called METCO, and basically what they do is I lived in Dorchester, but they would bus us out to the suburban areas. So I think that's actually what kind of pushed me so far left because I would have the Malcolm X books. And, you know, I'd get called down to the office. So we have Kaepernick now, but I was going to the principal's office, like, when I was, like, in 6th grade for not saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So I think that's kind of what it's been.
So your story's more interesting than ours.
No, well, I always, you know, I get the choices that my parents made in putting me in that type of setting. But I know I was fighting them back then, and even now, you know, it had its benefits, but I know for me, I had I was unsettled for most of school, and I still went, but it wasn't a priority. I didn't really care. So I think that's kind of what made me, it took a long time to get where I am as far as with the program that I'm doing now, but that experience definitely helped me say, okay, this is not what I want for my son. So
it was a blessing from that perspective.
Yeah,
it was clear.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah. So it's always interesting to hear how everyone, you know, what
their backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We have variety. And I think about those who, if you were caught, those who dropped out, those who weren't there even though they were physically in the seats, those who were enraged because of what they saw. And it takes me to this study that I saw when I was in grad school, where these two brothers, they looked at the IQ scores of some young black males who had stayed in school and had dropped out middle school mostly, but some high school. And they discovered that the IQ of the ones that dropped out was higher than the ones of those who had stayed in. And I said they couldn't be contained. So like you're talking about going to the principal's office, there was something, and the fight was over righteous things. It wasn't like I'm just trying to be rebellious. There's something wrong with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in many cases with those brothers who ended up incarcerated, they didn't know what it was. But like I think what's going on with our children in general, they're all the acting out, and their spirits know that something is not correct, even though they can't, you know, verbalize it because they're not sure. But you know, a toddler who is just exhausted and needs to go to sleep and doesn't want to go to sleep, so he's acting out. Absolutely. But you know, not knowing why himself. But but there's something going on that's not right.
Yeah. That's a lot of the things with our program. I try to incorporate the outdoors a lot. So we're outside in the woods for a good 2 hours at least a day.
Yes.
In the mornings especially. The afternoons are a little tricky because they're exhausted from the morning. But that part of it, I was particular about wanting that element in there. And I tried to get especially our boys in the program because I just know what's going to happen to them, and at least if they can have within those first 5 years that experience of being outdoors and really speaking to themselves, and I think parents appreciate that too. With I don't know what's going to happen next, where they'll send their children afterwards, but at least for this time being, it's been good for me to see that for my son as well, but for the boys themselves too. So I guess with my next question, what for your program, how do you get your parents? What types of parents do you have? Who needs your program?
Well, it's a huge range. Before I answer that though, when you're talking to these folks, the point that you made is extremely important. They need to be outside.
Yes.
And they need to be engaged. They need to play. They need to explore with our supervision. But they need to be able to do these things. We used to go for walks.
Yes.
Elementary, middle, high school. We go for walks and we talk and we look and explore, and leaves and rocks and soffits on houses. Everything, because that's where they can explore their curiosity. That's where they can mentally play. And they need. I didn't even think about that term, but that should be a requirement, just like chess should be a requirement in these schools. That should be a major requirement.
I've actually been looking at some chess programs for toddlers, and I know there are a few that does it like in the format of a storybook kind of from what I've heard. Yeah, so I'm trying to get that in order too, but I absolutely agree.
No rush. You know, it'll get there when it gets there. But in terms of the kind of parents that come to us, there's an enormous range. It ranges from folks who are seriously centered and they want their children to be in a disciplined environment that's African, where, you know, our traditions, our morals, our ethical sense of reality is there. To we had a parent whose child couldn't go to any school in the state of Georgia because of something that they had been accused of doing.
Oh wow!
And it was something so minor, and this guy has such a beautiful heart. But we've had a range. Now something happened, and we could never figure out what. For our first few years, it was kind of like a hodgepodge, potpourri, you know, what have you. And then about a decade ago, something happened, and we still haven't figured out what it was, but we started one school year, and every child there, except for one, came from a conscious or centered family.
Wow.
And you had this variety. There was an Islamic family who, you know, they were serious. There was a Kemetic, spiritual. We had all of this variety, and it's almost like we're saying, okay, well, what do we do now? They know that they're African.
So what do we teach them?
It was one of those years, and we were walking around, not in the days, but, you know, like giddy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
But
great.
I will say, but part of that too was we had to come to the realization that in our early years we're dealing with older students, and in fact, because this program started with us needing an African-centered high school for our daughter, so we started with older students.
Got it. Okay.
And that's going to be a major challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's a whole other ballgame.
And initially, so this school was not planned out. It was we needed a high school for our daughter. The one that we had planned no longer they went K through 12. In the year that she would have started high school, they discontinued the high school grades because of low enrollment. So we had to quickly come up with Plan B. And at that time, so this is 1999, there weren't African-centered high school programs in our area. So we just decided to homeschool her. And so our initial students were 2 students who would have been attending that same independent black school that she was scheduled to attend. They had been her classmates, you know, at that school. And it was one at a time, you know, when parent found out we were doing it. Oh, initially when we said yes to the first one, it was our daughter's only complaint was that she wouldn't have classmates because she's Miss Social Butterfly. And so we quickly said yes, you know, okay, so that problem is solved. She has a classmate. And then it was somebody else. And it was okay, you know, but it went from there, so it wasn't set out that this is, you know, an African-centered school and we're looking for,
Got it.
And we were open.
Yeah.
So, and people continued to come to us, you know, kind of word of mouth.
Yeah.
Yes. However, a lot of those students, and remember, so they're high schoolers, and when you have high schoolers who do not want to be in your school program, unlike younger children who might think, oh, homeschool is boring, whatever, and then they see they can have fun, they can have friends. The younger ones is less an issue, but with older ones, and they're determined.
Wow, I never even thought about that.
Yeah, and not to mention behavior issues. So initially we had parents coming to us. They weren't looking for an African-centered education. They needed a positive option, because Bob doesn't like the word alternative, because we should be the norm.
No, I agree. I love, that's one of my favorite things that you say. Yeah.
That we were a positive option to the headaches they were having. They weren't learning in the public schools. They were having behavior issues. So, and we love our African children. Yes, we will give you a chance. And we went through a number of years before we realized with high schoolers,
right.
when a child is determined not to learn, not to do, we're fighting a losing battle.
Absolutely.
So I think made part of that with the year, okay, here we go with all these African-centered people. We also had come to the recognition, okay, we're not the drama, so we can't do what we're here to do, to teach, and with teenagers who are totally in rebellion.
Right.
And I think, as the universe, so when we were ready, okay, we're all right, we need to deal with people who want, and the parents, and sometimes I won't say that, I think that there were parents who definitely, because they were willing to pay money, but there wasn't an appreciation in many cases or a desire for the African-centered education. Again, we were positive, okay, you're people in the community, former Morehouse professors, right. You love our children, but so I would say there was an evolution that we had to get to the point where, okay, yes, this is African-centered, and that means we still are open to children whose family may have never heard the word previously,
right?
And explain to them what that means to us, what we're doing here, and if they're on board. But we've become more selective that you can't be here creating drama and you don't want to be here,
right?
So I think both the different forces were at work, and it was an evolution process.
So how did you get through that? So, because I'm sure it wasn't even just behavior, with people coming in, meeting you at different levels, how were you able to, I guess, keep your sanity? What did you do personally? Because that's a lot for educators. Even for me, I'm doing a completely different age group. So I have my things, but what did you do for yourselves? How did you pour into each other? What was that like for you? How did you, it's a lot. It's a big question, but.
I think part of it was I had just had enough.
Yeah.
When we started this school, we had no rules. None. And we said we weren't going to have any rules.
Yeah.
Now we have pages.
Yeah. Yes.
And each rule was established as a result of something that occurred.
Yes.
Or, something that a student did or a parent did or what have you. I just got fed up, and I started dismissing the problem. And she started, I really dismissed, I would tell her, he's got to go, no more. And she would, because people don't know, she's the administrator of the school. I'll tell her, I'm just an employee.
Yeah.
She's the administrator of the school, and all, even though it's ours, it's her baby, it's her dream, which is perfectly fine with me, because I really didn't have a dream. But still, it reached a point where there was too much chaos. She wasn't able to do her job, and that's why when sisters start schools, especially with older children, I tell them you need to have a man there who understands the concept of discipline, because if not, then the level of disrespect that some of our young folk have toward sisters is going to make it so they can't teach. And if they're the first teachers, then the space needs to be made for them to do that.
That's big.
That's what I was doing. So it wasn't. And it wasn't just here. I don't know what was going on in the water or whatever, but it was like, when I started doing this, I discovered that Baba Jim, who's now an ancestor, he was going through the same process. He had removed a whole group of students. Sister Woody, who was Gay City, she had removed a group of students. And Ms. Jackson at Nebthet at the same time. And we weren't talking to each other.
Wow.
I was finding out about this later and sometimes during the process, but we had just had enough. It was like we were being removed from the possibility of being African-centered because it was just a constant fight. And I guess, I don't know, we said no more. Spirit said no more.
Right.
So we said no more. And the number of students dropped precipitously, but then once that had cleared out, it seemed like there was a receding, and we were getting more was coming to us of what we could do something with, or what we could help, because you're here to help.
Yeah.
And if the people who are coming to you don't want your help, you can't force it. You can't make that happen. So for me, and I didn't think about it at the time, it was doing something I didn't want to do, because we assumed that every child who came to us was sent to us. That was a given. I don't want to know your school scores. I don't want to know your discipline record unless you've done something like really horrendous.
Yeah.
I don't want to know anything because I don't want to prejudge.
Yeah.
But then things got to a point where we needed to not find those things out, but we needed to be told beforehand, because it was disruptive.
I learned that too.
Yeah, it's hard.
I absolutely learned that too.
But you're very fortunate to be working with the babies for whom have not,
Yes.
bought into the insanity.
Yeah. So do you all have an interviewing process that you do beforehand? How does that work? Yes.
I talk to all prospective parents, and I'm very detailed, and the word they use now, transparent, as to who we are, because it is a waste of their time and money, our time and energy to bring a child here, and it's not going to work for whatever reason. So I want parents to be as informed as possible, because even just saying African centered, we learned that even as parents before starting argument, people have very different definitions of what that means. So being very clear, not just the academics, because our program is much more in terms of we're trying to, our children say with their affirmations daily. The boys, I'm an African man in training, I'm an African woman in training, and so what does those things mean? I want them to check out our website. I want them to see Baruti's books, which speak to our philosophy, who we are, and if from the title of some of those books, they can automatically be, or I would specify books, So if you have an issue with your child hearing that, because we're trying to educate the children, so it's not just about schooling. So we have to talk about what's going on in the world and this Euro insanity that they're living in. And there are parents who, when we say African culture, that includes traditional values. And some black people who are following Europeans, the whole notion of values, morals, that's a buzzword to, okay, I don't want to be a part of that. And we want you to know, and we gladly, because if this is not a good fit, it doesn't help anybody, and for that to happen. So yes, I have detailed conversations with parents explaining who we are. Yes. And in many cases, the good thing is by doing so, the parents who already know, it saves them time. And I will happily, I have a list of programs, give them that list. These are, there may be a better fit, right. And that's the whole goal. If we're concerned about educating the children. So yes, if you're coming to us, we want you to consider us first. However, after you hear in detail who we are and it's not a good fit, please look at, check out other programs. Right.
So what would you, I have a mix of viewers, and even for my parents, it's kind of a mixed bunch as well. And I thought I was being pretty forward because my program is called Play Pan African, but no. I get all kinds of emails. But how would you define a Pan-African program? An African-centered program.
You just wrote a book. Oh, we should have your book.
I really like Kwame Okoto's definition of African-centered. And I don't want to take the time to read it, even though it's posted on my page, and I'll repost it and I'll send it to whoever may want it.
I believe I reposted it.
Yeah, to me, that is the most comprehensive definition of African-centered education I have read probably in my life, because it talks about everything from making sure that people are clear as to how we got into this situation, to what's keeping us in this situation, to what we need to do to get out of this situation, the kind of educators we need to be, the kind of parents we need to be, the kind of community we need to be, what we need to be building. And that is, I don't want to use the word isolated because people don't read that right, just like they don't read African-centered correct. But it's going to require us to come into ourselves and do what needs to be done amongst ourselves. And then if it's appropriate or necessary, whatever, then deal with other people. It's like when I talk about one aspect of African morality and ethics. I tell parents, well, you need to read Teaching of Ptahhotep and read Machiavelli's The Prince. I said, but you need to read Teaching of Ptahhotep first, because that gives them a sense of who they are first, and then they'll read Machiavelli through African eyes. You don't teach them, you don't have them read Machiavelli first, because if they do that, then they're going to interpret everything African through that. So the idea of African-centered education is, of course, the cultural base. That's first and foremost. We are Pan-African, but also the reconceptualization, the redefining things so that it puts us at the center. We say African-centered. People don't really get that centered part. They don't understand the intensity of that centered part. So they don't, and this isn't everybody. You know, when I say they, I'm talking about those who do not understand. They don't understand the value of knowing ourselves as African before knowing anything else, before knowing anybody else, before dealing with anybody else. And that requires us to look at who we are prior to being compromised.
Right.
You know, that's extremely important. It's if you want the fullness of something, you don't go halfway back and stop. You go all the way back to its beginnings. And we've gotten the idea that our beginnings are somehow not as good as other people's beginnings, or our beginnings aren't strong, or if you're African, you can't make it in this world, or you got to dress up with all the rest of this stuff in order to be African. I wasn't brought up that way. Even though I wasn't brought up in a quote-unquote African-centered home, I was brought up in the idea you learn what you want to, where you want to learn it at. You know, so I don't have to acquire this special brand of European, what have you, in order for me to be the kind of African that's going to be successful.
Right.
For me, the other part of that is that we're trying to build warriors. We're at war. You know, the Akabin is our symbol, and Akabin is the war horn. That's what we're all about. You know, there's no apology. That's part of that transparency that she talks about. We're building warriors. So when we talk to these students, and not just me, when we talk to these students, it's about their responsibility to African people. It's about the level of privilege that they have as a result of being able to access information that's untainted about who we are and what they need to do with that. So the definition of African-centered it's hard to state outside of the context of the idea of sovereignty, because education is supposed to take us somewhere. Right. Education is supposed to be grounded in something that will take us to that place, but it's supposed to take us somewhere. It's not just, you know, gotta be fun. Idiot can get a job.
Absolutely.
We're trying to build a reality. We're trying to equip our children. I'll close with this. There was a sister a number of years ago, older sister, who asked, "What is it that you want your children to get at Afrika?" And I said, I want them, if two of them, a boy and a girl from here, ended up on a deserted island, or the only two people on this planet, that they would recreate African culture, because that's what they know is real. That's what they believe in. But they got to get who they are and what this is supposed to look like, you know. And that's what I like to believe that we do here. We do online. We do when we lecture. We do everything.
Yes.
You know.
That's amazing. I love that.
I like that
love
too. Yeah.
that. That's so good. That is so good.
Good
Yes,
job.
that was good.
No, but from the first time you said that, yes, that's exactly.
Yeah, no, I never really thought of it that way. That's good. Okay. Well, we mentioned your book. Let's get to your book.
Okay.
So we talked about.
I want to. She wants to get a copy. She's here. Show copy person.
So we talked about who your program is for. Who is this book for?
This book is
educated people.
Is for lack of better words, it's for us.
It's for these viewers out
yes,
here.
It's for the viewers. Amos Wilson in his, we call him by the color because he's written so many. So his green book, Pan-African, is in, New World Order. He, in a paragraph, he talks about the fact that a person who is an educator, in our tradition, if you will, is to educate a nation. So if he was trying to make the point that these folks who are so focused on educating adults at the expense of the children and everybody else, they're doing it wrong. They're not real educators. So from the beginning, for us, it's been like the whole community. So this is the heart of it, because again, to go back, I dropped in the 7th grade, and I assumed that I looked at Kajufu's 4th grade syndrome, and I said, well, we need to start young. So we went back until we got back to that point. And the children are the center of it, because you can reach the adults through the children.
Yes.
And so, but it's not just the children. It's like with the K Book Lecture. It's also everybody in the community who's involved. There's outreach to brothers who are incarcerated, which that's been going on for decades. There is evening classes. I don't know how many evening classes. I don't know how many online courses that we have done over time, because whenever people call, whatever they ask you to do, most of my books are based on questions from folks in the community. It isn't, just not me saying, okay, what do I need to write about today? So this is a nation to be educated. Now, I don't think our heads are that big. We're going to educate the whole nation. We have a whole collection of people who do this. But if everybody's not being educated, then those who are not, they're going to be assaulting those who are. And they'll have the excuse because, well, nobody taught us. We didn't know. So even though this is Afrikan Institute, I don't look at it as limited to this school. Whoever we encounter, wherever they have a question, they have a thought, they're having a function they want us to come and do online, whatever it may be, wherever it is, because that's what we're supposed to do in my mind. I know in her mind also, but that's what we're supposed to. That's in our tradition. Everybody educated. So if you knew how to move the pieces of chess on the chessboard and I didn't, then you became my teacher in that game until I caught up with you and maybe surpassed you. Okay. Right. So everywhere.
Yeah.
I think this is probably too light.
They can see
it.
Well, do you want to tell them where they can purchase it? We can go over that real quick. To educated people, where can they buy it online?
Before you do that, educated people really started out from a lot of discussions with people who wanted to start homeschool programs and wanted to do their own institutions. And the thing that I found most, not troubling in a deep way, but troubling in terms of a question that needed to be answered, was that they really didn't have a good conception of what it meant to be African-centered.
Well, I was going to go there too.
Okay.
So, we can do that first. Yeah, we'll get that out the way too.
So it's available on our website, which is www.akabenhouse, which is one word, AKOB as in black, EN, the word house.com, akabenhouse.com.
Beautiful, perfect. So yes, that was, I'm meeting people. So I have my program, but I also have another company. It's Villaging Brown, and I just bring all of us together. So I do different events around the city. Okay. And so I meet people at all sorts of levels. And so some people are okay with where their children are going to school, but they're looking to supplement. So I guess how are you speaking to them as well, who might not be ready for necessarily an African-centered program where they can send their child to, but is this book speaking to them as well, with giving them tools that they can do on their own? Or what's the voice that you're, who would benefit from the book especially?
I really think that any of us could. I don't know if all of us can read this. My writing is not comforting. My writing is it's not instructive. It's calling us to act.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't have, personally, I don't have the tolerance for people who just want to talk.
So they might not be ready for it yet.
They might not be ready for it. What I suggest to people, if they know somebody who has a copy, pick out because there's so many chapters in here.
Mm-hmm.
Look at a chapter that has an interesting title. Start to read that chapter.
Got it.
See if it fits, because it doesn't have to be read front to back. Yeah. So but to me, anybody who is saying that their institution or what they're trying to start is African centered needs to read this.
Perfect.
So we can be clear.
Yes.
On exactly what we are building. So maybe we need to call this another name. Maybe we don't need to call this African centered, because it doesn't. Not that I am the spokesperson for what it means to be African centered, but if we're going to become an empowered people, then to me there are certain things, certain ways that we have to look at things, certain ways that things have to be done. We have to have a certain level of discipline. We have to have a certain vision. All these things have to be in place, or we're going to be having these, not to say these aren't good conversations, but we're going to have these same conversations from the same position in another 30, 40, 50,
Absolutely.
60 years. And we don't have time.
Right.
The children don't have time.
I agree.
Well, I would want to add, so of course the book is needed for educators who are starting or who have African programs, but for African-centered people generally, because there are specific chapters that deal with, how we started our program or a specific school setting, but much of the book is just talking about what it means to be African-centered. And that education, which we all need, that's not limited to what our children need, right? Yeah. That we put their schooling that they need, math, language, the basic schooling in an African-centered setting, because we're trying to educate that those two go hand in hand. But totally apart from that, it's for every African person that's interested in, the definition of being African-centered.
Absolutely.
As a child, as a parent, it's like for me, it's for all of us. And the one of the closing discussions in here has to do with something that almost really took off well in the 60s and 70s, the community concept, University Without Walls in DC. And that was going to work, and it got shut down for a reason. If we're going to move forward as a community, then we have to reestablish that. Of course, we had to have people doing their own thing, but that needs to start getting connected a little bit, and there are people who are good at that. They need to read this and say, okay, well, this is what we're trying to build. This is what we need to have. We need to look at credentials in this way. We need to look for wisdom in our community this way. We need to establish this network in this way so that we won't get undermined again.
Absolutely.
We did. There are certain lessons that I believe the universe put in our face, and we haven't gotten them yet because we're still trying to become part of something that we're not. So it's like the Black Wall Street thing. We're going to reestablish Black Wall Street. We need our own economy. I have no question about that. Garvey was quite clear. But the problem is that part of the lesson that we didn't learn is why that Black Wall Street, or those Black Wall Street, because many of them, they fell. They fell because we weren't prepared to defend. And that happens repeatedly. So there are certain lessons that have to do with the university, the school without walls, university without walls, that we didn't get. And if we don't correct that, all of this African-centered education movement is just going to make it easier for us to be sub-assimilated into insanity. So you have more intelligent slaves.
And I want to mention something, because everybody's not a reader, and nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
Several years ago, we did an Afrikan workshop on African-centered education, which was recorded, and we do have it available. The Baba who recorded it for us suggested, hey, use it as a fundraiser. So it's a private YouTube video. But if people are interested in that, so much of, probably all of that to some degree ended up in the book as part of this book. So that's available as well. People can email or reach out through Facebook Baruti or myself, our email addresses, our names, Baruti at Yahoo and Mwalimu Baruti at Yahoo. But reach out to us and we can send them the information, or simply if they send a $10 donation to Baruti at Yahoo and put in the notes section African Centered Education Workshop, or even workshop link, because we only have the one workshop that we make available. And we send, so that's a way of getting out information. But of course, as a small program, African Centered, I don't think any of the African Centered schools are rolling in the dough. It's a fundraiser, so it helps to pay the bills. But we're also getting information out, and it's a small $10 donation.
Okay, may I include that in the
Absolutely.
description?
Yes.
Okay, so all of that will be in the description below as well. So perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, of
Appreciate
course.
that.
So all of that is that speaks to me. I work with the younger children, so in how I put the program together, it's definitely focused on self-love, but also creating a sense of confidence with them in themselves, in the sense of allegiance. So we do, apart from going outside, we do things like horseback riding. We do.
You want to see pictures?
Yes.
Yeah. We do horseback riding. We're gonna do capoeira. We have
Right.
some yoga. It's a well-rounded program, and a lot of it, when people see it, they're like, "Oh, these cute little toddlers." And for me, I'm like, "No, it's not just cute little toddlers," because in my eyes, I want them to be comfortable with each other and also understand where they come from and who they are, but then build a level of confidence that we get to that point when they are older and they have to make these decisions, and it is still African centered and still just a fearlessness amongst themselves. So I always call for people to really focus on early childhood, because that is the starting point. And I've heard people, we were talking about this, I've mentioned that, where there are a lot of people who say, birth through 5 is really important. You mentioned conception even before that. But I don't feel like there's a lot of resources for people, especially African centered. Besides books, we have a plethora of books. But even programming, and for me, I just felt like, okay, well, maybe I need to step into that to make more for it. But we were talking about how a lot of the programs do start when they're older, and the importance of critical thinking for younger children. What does that look like for a 3-year-old? What does sovereignty look like for a 4-year-old? What does that look like? So I appreciate what you're saying, because basically what I do is concepts that are brought up in general, I bring it down to, okay, what is my lesson plan going to look like for them? And I appreciate what you all do so much. In that said, if you could, a lot of people already know that I focus on early childhood. What are 5 things that are important to teach children under 5?
So that
5
in whatever area, academic.
More along the lines of being African centered. Like, what are the 5 things that need to be, that this is partially for me. Am I missing anything? So what would you say that's important for children under 5 to learn? What should we be focusing on?
A little bit, teeny bit before that, something you just said. In order to make that happen, where you have these younger children covered, where people are asking themselves the questions that will give them the answers to build what needs to be built for them, the idea has to be put out there. So people who have very young children, or before they have children, or when they're teens, what have you, they need to start thinking about what that looks like for their children. So these programs will be created by default, because they realize it's a problem. But if no one is saying it, I know that we really haven't said that, because we're dealing with, mainly older. For somebody to be at the level where they're entering that, to say we don't have the tools that we need, we don't have the people that we need, we don't have the curriculum that we need, we don't have the ideas that we need, we don't have these concepts reconceptualized and broken down so that these children can learn them systematically over the next 5 years, and by the time that 5th year is over, they really understand what sovereignty means. They really understand what reconceptualization means. They really understand what African centered means. They understand what village and community mean. They understand their responsibility in this process. They understand their power. They understand that what they do is always their choice.
Right.
Even when they're little, it's still their choice. There might be ramifications that, really negatively impact them if they go against those who love them and look out for them. But those ideas are extremely important to pass on as a mission. Commissioning this generation, the next generation of child bearers and child carers and all that, to say, okay, well, we need to establish a great grassroots thing. Okay, the if you will, the idea of the UNIA at a global level, and when you look at it like this, you say, okay, we're trying to start this at a global level. We're doing this. We are establishing the foundation. Knowing that's going to take a generation or two to get it in the place we want it to be, but we're doing this, and this is our mission, and nothing is going to stop. I am so surprised when I see people who are looking at what they're trying to build based on that. Some of them because they're running away from something, some of them because they're running towards something, some of them because they know something is horribly wrong and they just are trying to find a way to fix it. But to have that assignment be given by people who they respect, who are doing the work, okay? Because if you're how do I say this nicely? If you're respecting somebody who's not doing the work because that's the model that you want to do, I don't want you anywhere near the process.
Absolutely.
Because your whole idea is not doing the work. Your whole idea is taking credit from what other people are doing or talking about it for the next 20 years. This needs to be done now. This needs to be done like yesterday. So my point, to make them aware that this is an issue. And that you are concerned about it because you're trying to do this and you're seeing this gap. Okay, how do we fill this gap? That's the role of the educator.
Bring awareness, yeah.
You find the holes in what your students don't know, and you try to fill in those holes. That's what good parents do.
Absolutely.
They look for when that child is not right. They look for when the fever or the child's walking different than they normally do, or saying something that they normally don't say. That's what the parents' radar is, to find out what's wrong. Not necessarily what's right. That's wonderful, but the radar is to find out what's wrong because you don't want anything bad to happen. So we have to be those people who are about the business of educating our children, whether they are educators, we're all educators, whether they consider themselves educators or not. They have to have their radar fine-tuned so that they can, okay, I can do that. Okay, I can add that. Okay, I like words. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a book with the words that children, to back on that theme, a collection of words that children should know by the time they're 6 years of age, and how they should know them at that age.
Got it.
And go back and go back and go back and go back until the first sounds, and bring it forward. You got a curriculum there. Not like books. It can be fun.
Yes.
Or it should be fun for them. A little.
Wow.
In terms of what are we?
No, well, I have some ideas.
Okay.
I went for handouts. Our children need to know the oracles of Ma'at, their spiritual foundation. And I have an extra.
I'm trying to think of the book. Which book is that? There's a children's book that does go over the
number. I think one.
Was that one of Kajara's?
If I think of it, I will put it below too. But I had it.
They need to have the children read Kajara's book anyway.
Which and I think it's mind, body, and spirit.
I do.
Do we have? Okay, you got that one.
You can get it if you have it. We do have that one. We do that every Friday at least before we do yoga. That one we do have.
Now, Mama Ashley, we have our students say affirmations daily, and the power of the spoken word.
Absolutely.
So even for them to embrace being African centered, I actually have the school copy, so I'm wear and tear on that one.
Okay.
have the things we're affirming. I'm African man or woman in training. I'm an African warrior scholar. I embrace African beauty, culture, heritage.
So just like the word affirmation, they should be clear on what that means by the
Mm-hmm.
time they are 5 or 6 or 7, so they feel it. We don't think about it. We just use these terms, but we don't think about the degree to which they really understand it, and it's power relative to them.
Yes. We actually do Hey Black Child.
Okay.
So that's a book that we read pretty much every day. So that one it's not quite as extensive as this. This is great.
Developed that over the years.
I love this.
Because the Nomo,
And
the
you have the
African
principles
term.
in here too.
Yes. The
Okay.
power of the spoken word.
Mhm.
So for them to speak it daily.
Absolutely.
And there are some pledges in here.
A pledge
Okay,
There
good.
are some
to our African flag.
There are a number
that's
of
great.
pledges in here.
Isn't okay? Baba has pledges in the book,
Oh, that's good.
but
Good,
we
good,
have
good,
the
good.
children do
Mhm.
a pledge daily,
Mhm.
and the kind of thing. I know I can recite excerpts from things I memorized,
Mhm.
in childhood because I had to memorize it.
Right.
And these were things I didn't have to say. Well, the pledge I did, every single day, but the important things we have to reinforce, and repeating it daily. And again, you had such a privilege working with the youngest children. That's where
Blank
the
slate.
foundation,
Yeah. Mhm,
yes,
mhm, mhm.
and without the resistance. So they're
Absolutely.
open.
Yeah.
And in fact, they children pick up languages in those early
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So they definitely need African language, Mama.
Mhm,
So and
yes.
even if if you just incorporate here, we have Tree. I'm not a fluent speaker.
Mhm.
I've taken a couple of mini classes.
Mhm.
So, but as I quickly got over, I'm not fluent. We need to know African languages. So when we've had times when we had fluent
Yeah.
Tree speakers to come in, but if not, just them. We talk about what Europeans took from us, and one of those important things was our language, which is very much a part of our culture. We have to
Absolutely.
reclaim it.
Mhm.
And young children, so they can soak up whatever you give them. So every African term they need to know.
Implement it in there.
You know.
I actually do need to get better about that. They have Swahili, but
Good.
I don't. I would like to start implementing more language in there on my end too, because I still have to grow in that. We did.
So do we.
Yeah.
We've been doing it.
There's just so
year
much.
21.
Yeah.
Yes.
Constantly, to
But then that's a
implement.
part of the story. We don't wait until I got my language down
You
packed,
just pick it up and
you
go. Yeah,
you
you're right.
go with what you have.
That's big too, because I think even for the concept of even wanting to homeschool, it feels like such a big feat. That's why I love your story, because it just kind of happened to
Yes,
you. You were
and
called
we
into-
rolled.
Yeah,
Yes.
that a lot
Wasn't
of people
planned.
feel like, I'm even on Facebook.
I have to take that out.
It's okay. On Facebook, I'm in a lot of mommy groups or homeschooling groups, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, what do I do? What resources do I need?" And it can be scary because it's taking the initiative, and it's really starting something new, and you're changing your story. So I love that it wasn't something that you necessarily had a blueprint for.
And to this day,
Yeah.
your curriculum, we teach everything Africa is a part of.
Yeah.
So with literature, it's going to be books by and about us.
And you know what? And I even get overwhelmed because I'm like, we didn't get to do this. We didn't get to do this.
Oh, we
There's
do too.
so
All the
much
time. All the
stuff.
time. All the time.
Even for them, their attention span is so short. So I'm constantly like, I have to get over that. Like,
Yes,
I can't cram
get
it all
over it.
into
It's
their
not
No,
head.
no.
But I think that's the other thing too, is we want our children to be lifelong learners anyway. So you're not going to get it all done.
Right.
But if you set the foundation where they're curious and then they
That's
want to
what-
keep building on it, then I think you're good to go anyway. So this is
the
definitely
foundation, that's major. You're setting a foundation.
Mhm.
It's going to be impossible for any school program to put all the pieces to the house, but a strong foundation can be built upon.
Absolutely.
And that's true for the academics too, because when children are struggling, they did not get a strong foundation. So if it's math, if they didn't get those basics, addition, subtraction, multiplication, facts, they struggle.
Yep.
Because they don't have a foundation.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what we're that's very much what we're doing. Giving a foundation.
To be lifelong learners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And just on that tip, this book, Ewa,
Well used.
I think this is extremely important. I think this is probably one of my most important writings. A number of parents have used this as a teaching tool in their home. Some of them even gone through it. I would say middle schoolers, high schoolers, because the rules that guided us in our tradition I've placed in here so they can study different aspects, different collections of rules, different sets of the kind of person that you're supposed to be. It's all about the kind of character that we're supposed to be, and it doesn't take you from your warriorhood. It just speaks to the kind of person that you're supposed to be toward people who respect you, the community you're trying to build, etc., etc. But I was surprised that there were parents who took this, who were homeschooling, and they sat down and used this as part of their curriculum because it has that in it. It has, the oracles of Mahat in it. It has all, and they're discussed in such a way that there is a lesson plan, with that. So you can go over with your child what kind of person they need to be as an African. So I'm really pleased with what has been done with this in homes relative to the children. But in each case, it was an adult with some children or mom and dad with a child or two children where they sat and they used this sort of like what my mother used to make us do with the Bible, if you will. You had to read a verse every night, and we talk about it, and then read one the next night, and be prepared when, and it was, it's more of a spiritual thing. So I really recommend this for folks who are homeschooled, well, of course, schooled, period, but homeschooling. I really recommend
Got it.
this.
Okay. And then I'll include that as well. All right.
Thank you.
It's a lot of good stuff.
And so you have this book. You gotta put that.
Yes.
And did you get this one, sister?
We definitely have that book.
Great.
Definitely. That's one we go back to a lot. Yes.
Those terms, sovereignty and culture, all of that's definitely in here.
And
Give thanks for the warriors who are doing the children's books.
Yes, no, it's definitely needed.
Yes,
it's definitely needed. That I'm confident in, that we have so many options for us there, because that's a big part of it. Circle time and bringing them back and reading those stories and being able to go back to it. That's helped my program take off. Just having that as references and so yeah.
Okay, and songs. That's a definite way. And I don't know the origin of the song. There's a nation song, and I taught it to our grands, and it just melts my heart.
They take it.
We're gonna build a nation, a beautiful nation, and it, so what? We're gonna build a nation, a beautiful nation. No, beautiful, a beautiful nation, a black nation in this desolate place. So look how we do it, 'cause here we come. And this is my grandson really gets me. Ain't nothing gonna stop us. Yay, Bo. I said yay, Bo. I said yay,
that.
I love it too.
Oh my gosh, I have to learn. Yes, I definitely have to.
And of course they love acting it out,
We don't have a son. Okay.
Now you do.
Yes, now we do. We absolutely do. I'm gonna have to learn that one. Yeah.
And actually, the age of our children, even though the older ones will act like, you're making, but the ones who are not teens, they love it too.
Yeah.
Because we will sing Earth Day songs. There's a short tree Earth Day song, and Faraha Kuzalia. Okay, but then what I've done in previous years, so we do the nation song, and it just reminded me, because I was like, okay, let's do the Earth Day songs. Are we gonna do the nation song? Yes. And then I'll flash back to my grandbabies. But songs can,
Yeah, especially for that age, they love music. We do a lot of that, but we do not have a song. Well, now we do. So you're gonna teach it to me.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes, I will.
Okay.
In fact, I already have it printed out
Okay,
because I gave it to the
perfect.
children.
You're so
But-
organized. Extremely organized.
Isn't that funny, Baruti?
Yeah.
Bless your heart. We affirm. We affirm it to be true.
That is funny. You don't think you're organized? No?
Oh, that's a challenge.
Okay.
He's more organized than I
It
am.
depends.
Okay.
It depends upon what, kind of organization you're talking about.
Okay.
When it comes to
It
dealing,
means certain
dealing with
things.
parents,
Okay, got it.
me,
Okay.
just let me write.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
But a couple of points, and we already said, but I think I can't stress it enough, and something I've done in recent years here. The children have, and not your children would maybe do this, but I'm trying to stress the parents. The spiritual needs of our children, I don't see being met, and oftentimes we're very political, but there's nothing spiritual. People, we've left the Christian churches,
Yes.
and people didn't recognize, okay, well, that's a religion, and that's fine if you choose to leave. However, what's being done for your spiritual needs? And oftentimes with adults, if they were raised, and you don't have to get spirituality from a religion, but that has been our experience generally in this culture, so something was planted with them. And they leave, and even for the adults, when they don't continue to nurture their spirit. So we're angry, we're political, we're doing nation building work, but part of nation building work is healing, and we have spiritual needs that are not being met, and the havoc and the healing we need just in general from what our story on my alpha, which is continuing, from being kidnapped, that whole shebang. But then what happens in our family as a result, the trauma continues. So I'm specifically having children, the school affirmations are in that healing journal, the oracles of Ma'at, specific Proverbs generally are in there, but Proverbs that we've assigned to, if we have a child who likes to lie, so we have to put down some Proverbs, what lying is about, things that they need to work on. But so here with Clear with Parents, we're not, because parents are scared, you're trying to know, we're not trying to indoctrinate, but clearly, and this year our school is focusing on mental health disorders at the science fair.
Okay.
In February, the annual health science fair. It's a growing issue. We've had children in the community to commit suicide. So it's, whatever's going on, it used to be, I could laugh because, the craziness, that was white folks, and, they deserve it from what they did to other people. But all of that craziness, we're dealing with it, and we're suffering, and it's so important that we find a way to help our children. They need that spiritual foundation.
Well, it's also funny because African culture goes hand in hand with spirituality.
Yes.
You can't.
Right.
So I find you can't bypass that.
Some people do though.
They're trying
But-
to find a way to do that without.
And but that's not it though.
Right. That's just a part of who
It's
we
not
are.
part of
African
it.
anymore.
Spirit
It's
is
not.
a major
Right.
part
So
of who
yeah,
we
you
are.
have to. That's an interesting point.
And that's part of the problem that we have when you talk about the conscious community, because the word has become so watered down. It has come to fit whatever you happen to have. If you have, locks and some melanin in your skin, so we've been sidetracked by that. We shouldn't have to come back and redefine what it means to be African centered, but we're having to come back because there's so many wrong, flawed, weak, watered down, compromised definitions that folks who are trying to be African, trying to be spiritual, they're like, well, maybe this isn't it.
Right.
Maybe we're doing this wrong. Maybe that's really not African. Maybe Africans did choose who they were. No, that was, like you said, that was part and parcel of who we were. There wasn't any question. There wasn't any discussion about that. That was, you were connected to spirit. Period.
Yeah.
I think in many cases it's just a lack of clarity.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, I love Africa, but oftentimes, hey, we had to learn, right? So our introduction to the African way was through our daughter attending an African-centered school.
Right.
So people often don't know, and there are people who know who, you know, they want to be on the fringe, they want a foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely we have sources out there, you know, to guide us.
Get everybody right. Get everybody
Now,
right.
and I don't know, we probably, I don't, were we supposed to end at 8? What did we get a
Yeah.
8? Okay. But I wanted to also, I love my list.
Okay.
Let me get something. But symbols are very important.
Yes.
So definitely the bandera, the red, black, and green, and you know, children learning, because even though they wouldn't be able, your children at this point, say necessarily explain in detail, but red is for the blood, black is for the people, green is for the land. But the Adinkra symbols, because you know that's.
I made little stamps.
Oh!
I ordered them, and then that's one of their art projects, is they just do the stamps with them.
Great.
Absolutely, yeah.
But those are really important, because all of, you know, in fact, because we're surrounding them with all things African, and of course visual, you know, that's very important. So the hearing, the seeing, so all things, you know, that they're just soaking it in from every angle.
One of the most beautiful weddings I ever saw, that I was, what do you call them?
You officiated?
I officiated, was they had each of he and she picked out a number of Adinkra symbols that reflected what they were about and where they were trying to go. And explained, you know, what each of them were. So that, you know, that needs from, what do you say, from the roots to that needs to be part of it. So it will give them, I think when you know stuff, when you're familiar with it, you know, even though you got that humility, you know, they had that arrogance, you had that humility, you can look at okay, yeah, and they know it, and they know where they're going, and they know how to direct that better, because they have the information, they have the idea, they have the philosophy, they have the culture inside, because they got it from us, and they're ready to roll with it. So all these little things, the stamps, I love that. They're going to be playing with that forever, stamping each other's face. Yeah, but they're going to get it.
But they'll see it, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I love that.
Of course, you know, repetition, so constantly
all over the
seeing,
place,
hearing, speaking.
Everywhere.
Every day.
And they appreciate that too. I mean, they need it, but they also want it. Like, they love it. They love having, you know, things that they go into. That's not a surprise. I never even thought to do a song, but they would absolutely eat that right up. So, and they, you know, we have the flag hanging up. We do a lot of projects that talk about the different colors. So we made green Play-Doh the other day to go over the land, and then we have like a little cookie cutter in the shape of Africa. So there's constant stuff like that, and I try to post as much online as possible, so people will get ideas to see how they can do that. But it's nice to hear things that I might not have thought of, and I've gotten a ton of ideas from you all just speaking. So as soon as I get home, we're gonna go over some stuff. I love that. I really, really do. Yeah.
So that was my list.
No, that's awesome.
I still think, and I wish that we could put together a committee of 3 or 4 or 5 people. Writing a curriculum is extremely difficult. It's tedious, it's long work, and especially when you talk about a curriculum that's culturally focused. I can give you a list of books to read, you know, in biology, whatever, to that, but to infuse into that what it means to be African as a biologist, you know, where biology actually came from and how it's African.
Right.
That takes some serious doing, right? So there needs to be, I would argue, maybe even people who are educating, who are crystal clear, 5, 6 or 7 people who meet on maybe a quarterly basis, because it's going to take years.
It will. For
them to sit down and to play with this idea and to get it down pat so that they can present, okay, this is how we see African-centered education from pre-K through 7th grade in terms of the concepts that they need to know, in terms of the order of them.
Yes.
Now the Ekotos have
it's already
well, I haven't seen the rest. Well, I think it still needs to be revised. It needs to be redone. People need to be doing it because it's an exercise in education for the educators who are involved. That doesn't mean that we can't pull from these other folks. I don't think there's a better one in terms of terminology for Africans in education than the one that the Dakotas put out for the social sciences. It's every term I can think of that we might need to learn is there, and they have it grade per grade, so you should know this concept before you learn this concept, etc., etc. But I think that along with other people's minds in terms of their actual practice of this for their own schools, because every school is not alike.
Right.
Every person, is not alike, and a lot of things that are on the Koto's list, some people aren't there yet. They're not going to get and understand the reasoning for it. And the reasoning for it is extremely important, but that reasoning is only going to come through you studying what you need to study and continue to move forward in that direction. And the children need to have some order to that.
Right.
Or it becomes haphazard, it becomes ideological, if you will. Not wrong ideology, but it becomes sort of a dogma, in the process of their learning where they feel that their thinking is being obliterated. So that I think is important. If it can't be done in groups, then our serious schools need to have committees of people who say, well, these are the 10 words that we think that the children need to learn this year. Can you incorporate them into?
And also, I just think that the times call for, especially here in the United States, just the way that things are going, it's always important to kind of take reference of, okay, where are we in our society now? How can we prepare our children in this climate? What is this going to look like? So I'm all for going back and really seeing how do we need to change our teaching styles to fit these children. You mentioned a lot of mental health things that we're coming up upon. Okay, so what's that going to look like for our curriculums moving forward? We can't do things the same way. Even I find, I keep bringing up the nature part of it, but even that, getting a lot of us to understand why it's so important for our children to be not only just outside, but have an understanding of the woods. I'm a big advocate for that. And I think there's so many things that implementing that into a curriculum just it helps so much. And so that part of it, I think, is one thing we need to start calling for educators as well. But definitely, with the way that things are going, I think it would be helpful for us to commit to maybe even every 10, 15 years or so, we go back and then revise it, build on it. Okay, what's happening now? What do we foresee? Okay, we got to get prepared again. What do we need to change? So I think that would be excellent.
I would want to recommend that people check out
What's
CB, yes,
absolutely.
which, so, and they can, basically, you have something that you're not totally trying to start from scratch.
No, because that's a nightmare. Which is why, that's another reason why I look to you all, I look to other examples as well, and then I kind of built off of that. So no, I don't recommend just trying to, because it is a lot harder.
CB is actually an acronym, CIBI, for Council of Independent Black Institutions, and that's cb.org. So that they have things for homeschool, so for schools, but also homeschooling parents. And one of the major issues, homeschooling parents or parents who are considering, it's the curriculum. And for those who have no teaching background.
Right, it's uncomfortable.
Yes, and we have parents who won't do it as a result.
Yeah.
But they do need to know there's a lot, there are resources out there. And I think we mentioned in our workshop, resources, but also, not just people come from out of town to Liberated Minds, Black Homeschooling Education Expo, Queen Titus. Resources galore. I just found 2 additional books that just sitting, because we're vending, so I don't get to necessarily go around and check out, but I was no accidents next to someone vending and found 2 books, but the resources are just absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
So somebody there selling these maps, these
Oh, right, really?
timelines.
Oh, yeah, because people
I
come
think
here
I did see
always.
him up in the
Two
front.
tables
Yep,
down from us,
yep,
yeah.
I did see that. Yep.
But also, Queen Thais has gotten an app developed in terms of a directory of programs, which is so wonderful.
Look the name of it up. So basically, wherever you are, you can find African-centered programs near you, homeschooling or just extracurricular stuff. So that because even I get questions on my Instagram from people who don't live in Georgia or Atlanta, and I'm like, wait a minute, go to the app. So that's been helpful for me too. So yes. She's a genius for that, and I'm so glad she did that, because that's definitely
it's so needed. Yes,
because a lot of people feel alone.
Yeah,
they don't know what to do,
Yeah,
especially if they're just stepping into it. So it's nice to have a resource like that where they can refer to or even direct other people, family members.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I think the probably the last point I want to make, which may be the most important point, is this concept of sovereignty. So when we're talking about how to use what they're getting while they're learning this, it's sort of like the idea that you have to look at to where you're going and then come backward to where you're at. Because I've had a number of people here say, well, what is your vision of what the future's supposed to look like? What is African society to you? If our children project, a different point. If our children can design, can visualize what African society is supposed to look like now, whether it's in this country, whether it's globally, whether it's on the whatever, it doesn't really make a difference. That you're forcing their minds to visualize what they need to get to.
Yes.
And then they can move back and see what's going on now, what's wrong now, and how to correct that so that it can move in that direction. That is an exercise for them, because then you frame their vision, you frame their work for them. Oh, well, you said that we need to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, go build, go create. But unless they have that vision of sovereignty, which so many of us find impossible because we see ourselves as powerless relative to our destruction, if they can visualize the children who, if they're genius, then I understand why they can't create sovereignty for us. But they have to be able to visualize what that's like based upon African ways, based upon African reality, based upon African character, based upon how a city would be structured along African lines. They can create that, then it can come back and they say, okay, this is what I need to do, regardless of all of this chaos. I can see that. That, I think, needs to be going on in all of our schools, because if we can't identify where we're going, if we're just studying, for a job, if we can't identify where we're trying to get, then I don't know why we even have African-centered schools. What are we doing?
I think that's even more so for the educators or the parents to define that for themselves, because it can get, I'm sort of a unique program in that there's not a lot of people exactly doing the same thing that I'm doing, but I keep that vision in line, and that's kind of like, okay, it keeps you motivated at the very least. So it's a course of correction for yourself, but it's also, okay, there's still that possibility. Let's go. Let's keep it. Yeah. So I think that's a brilliant way to sum it all up, because you have to have the vision in line. And I think with this book especially, giving people the tools, and then also showing this is what it could be, this is how you do it, and if they have that as a reference, then
I agree.
Just
I agree, 100%.
That's what it's all about. Because if it's not about sovereignty,
then there's no point.
Right.
yes, there's no
There's
point.
no point.
Right. Just sort of swimming around waiting to drown.
No. Oh gosh. No, we don't want that.
No, absolutely do not. Absolutely. I refuse to accept that.
No, you can't accept it. Well, with that said, I thank you both so much.
And
Honor
Matasi, thank
for
you.
you.
Yes, Yes, it's an honor whenever people, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
I've
What
been
we have
waiting
to
to do
say.
this, but I was like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. But you just gotta do it.
Right.
So
Yes.
my program is growing. I'm so thankful for all the work that you do, because it's a reminder, and it keeps me motivated for the work that I do with these children. I hope it motivates you all. Please get this book. I'm so excited to have it as a resource, and I hope my viewers understand how important it is to have it. Yes. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Ashley, Mama Ashley.
Absolutely. We appreciate what
This
you
was
are doing.
fun.
Yes.
I tell you, generally on a Thursday night right about now, I'm
Yes,
kind of,
Just tired.
Yes.
but you know, you talk about nation building
Yes.
and sovereignty, you get some
Absolutely.
energy.
I'm not going to say what's happening after you leave.
Yeah.
I might not get out to share with you.
That is too funny. All right, thank you guys so much. VillagingBrown.com, Instagram, Early Childhood Enthusiasts. I'll list all the resources below in the caption. Thank you guys for watching, and I apologize for not being able to go live last minute, thing I had no idea about. But we appreciate you. Thank you.
Bibi
Thank you for African liberation and sovereignty.